I have something to say.
मुझे कुछ कहना है.
Mình phải nói cái gì?
J'ai quelque chose à dire.
Tengo algo que decir.
I have something to say.
This is Chad and Erica, and we have something to say. Thank you for joining. This is another episode of Something to Say with Chad
and Erica.
Today we have Dervin, who will be talking with us just about his life, and we'll just be discussing some of the differences with growing up in Jamaica, as he still lives there, and comparing that against my experience here in the US, even though, I still grew up there. But we'll let Dervin begin by introducing himself.
Well, hi, everyone. Like Chad and Erica said, I'm Dervin. Been living in Jamaica for all my life, a Jamaican born and raised, 27 years old. And I guess for the purpose of this conversation, openly gay, living in Jamaica, the place that was once referred to as the most homophobic, country in the world. And, I think I was raised during a time where it wasn't the most homophobic period for LGBT people in Jamaica, but it was definitely a rough patch, a rough period compared to what it is now. Most of the work that I did, over the past 10 years has been around LGBT advocacy, human rights issues, sexual and reproductive health, youth and adolescent health, HIV and all that. And now I've kind of moved past that and living life differently as I was before, which has allowed me to kind of live or navigate Jamaican space much differently than before.
Just to start out, you and we grew up, or we pretty much met around 2008, around 2008, 2010.
Around that time, yeah.
And kind of just going back to what you were saying with how Jamaica used to be. I mean, and this is one of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk to you about this, because I don't live there anymore, so I don't really know what it's really like. I have my own perception, but you're actually living living there. So I think that holds a lot more weight. But I remember when I was there, I did feel very fearful about just being myself. And I was kind of talking to Erica about it too. I feel like when you're there, you kind of get used to just the precautions that you kind of have to take, especially if you're dating, if you're not so masculine, you kind of have certain more challenges, or you feel like you have to kind of compensate in certain ways. I remember when I was there, I lived in a pretty dangerous, towards the end of it especially, I lived in a pretty dangerous community. And just walking throughout the neighborhood itself felt very dangerous. I felt like I was being watched, and it wasn't necessarily that people even probably thought I was gay. Well, probably they did. But the reason for them thinking that was mainly just because I was light-skinned, and, they probably thought I talked a certain way. I talk more standard English versus people there generally talk patois, which is the local dialect.
The language.
The language, correct. So because of that, I feel like I kind of stood out a lot in their old Spanish town. So that made it very challenging for me growing up. But what would you say it was like for you when you were growing up? Even before you met me?
I think for me, probably be the same thing. Expressing myself was always this major issue for me, not being able to, because you're very concerned about, okay, what's going to happen when you turn the corner? You can navigate to some extent where you live, but there are times, especially when I was taking public transportation, you never know the people that you're going to come across. And sometimes to get from one place to another, if you're not driving, if you don't have your own vehicle, you'd have to pass through certain communities or through certain public areas that at the time was really known for being extremely aggressive towards LGBT people. And I would always joke to my friends and be like, I could just be standing up doing nothing, and someone would look at me and be like, oh,
yeah,
Batiman, or you're gay or whatever. And I was like, okay, what did I do? I literally was just breathing. And you assumed Like, I don't understand. And I think even times like that, it really did make me feel uncomfortable, like there was something wrong with me. Why can't I be a bit more normal, so to speak? I mean, I can go all the way back to, primary school, which I'm not sure the equivalent there for you guys, but school that covers ages 6 to about 11. And I was always very effeminate. And I walked, people would say that I walked like my mother. And my mother definitely does know how to walk. And like, even from then, I would be teased about being effeminate, being called sissy or girly. And it hurt then. At that time, I didn't know what being gay meant. And I don't think they even knew. They would say certain terms and stuff like that, but we didn't quite understand exactly what it means. But then when I got to high school, and that's where the vocabulary of young people became a bit more prominent, became a bit more clear. So when they started saying things, it hurt more, and you definitely understand what they're saying, even if you still don't even know what your sexual orientation is. Because I remember even, grade 7 or grade 8, I still did not know what gay meant, I knew that I had feelings for the same sex, but I didn't know it was a term. But I definitely knew that it was frowned upon to some extent. And when you're in high school, the teasing and the bullying becomes extremely more apparent, and it's really in your face and becomes a bit more violent and aggressive. And so, like, during that whole primary school, high school period, I felt uncomfortable being myself because I felt like I was a problem and that I needed fixing. And there are certain things that I went through just to kind of fit in. Like, I would bleach my skin, I would adjust how my clothes fit. I would do things to my hair because these were what the popular kids were doing, and I just wanted to fit in with them. So maybe if I did something, if I looked more like them, they'll stop harassing me. But at the same time, because of where I lived, like in my space with my family and stuff like that, it was easier for me to come home to a space that was welcoming. So while I was always struggling to express myself, I did to some extent express to the extent that I could. Like, I would always be experimenting with my hair. I remember when I was younger, like I was younger than 10, and I'd always wear my parents' shirt, like a shirt on my head, and I'll fix it so that it looks like I have an Alea hairstyle. So like the bangs would be in the front and I'll flip it back and stuff. And I cannot recall my brothers or my father or my mother telling me not to do that. So to some extent, I was able to express myself or feel comfortable having a safe haven at home, where I know that outside the open world is very aggressive and daunting and not hospitable for someone like me. But I know that once I came back home, those concerns went out the window or they stayed outside because I was in like this very enabling environment. Now, Chad, you mentioned something about, you left. And I'm still here. And there's a funny story about that, but I suppose we'll get into another time. But basically, I should have been the one in Chicago right now, and Chad should have been the one being here. But he told me, no, Dervin, finish university, do not leave. And then like 2 seconds later, he left and left me in Jamaica. But I'm not holding grudges. You can tell that I'm not holding grudges. But you said that you don't live in Jamaica anymore, so you might have a different perception. But I think that perception that you had of when you left, that you still hold on to, is a useful reminder of where we're coming from. Because sometimes I would forget that, because I'm in a completely different space right now, and I'm somewhat in a privileged environment, like I drive, so I don't have to interact with people who I don't want to interact with. I can avoid certain spaces. I have money to not be in a certain space if I don't want to. I work in an environment that is LGBT friendly. They have to be LGBT friendly. So sometimes it's easy for persons who are in this sort of privileged space, or persons who have just passed the era of rampant homophobia in Jamaica, to forget where they're coming from, or really to forget what may still be happening in some communities. Because Jamaica really isn't what it was 10 years ago, but there's still some people, depending on where they are, who are experiencing the same things that happened 10 years ago. And it's sometimes easy for us to forget that, especially those who are privileged, because we're not living that experience anymore. So when you mention that you're not living in Jamaica, but you still have those perceptions, it's important for us to maybe correct those perceptions, or not necessarily correct, but to give a more nuanced impression or idea of what is really happening in Jamaica at the moment. But at the same time, it's useful to remember those memories that you have, because they're not false, they're not made up, they're memories that we do have. And there are times when it does still trigger me. Like if I remember when I just started working where I am now, and it was good being in a position where I had a nice title and I basically could dress however I wanted, but I was not driving. I just started working there. And I remember I was wearing this very silk shirt to work, and it was cut down in the middle. So I buttoned it down. I was just walking across the road, and I had my Chelsea boots on and my super skinny jeans, and I'm just living the life. And someone drove past and be like, "Batman." And I was like, oh my God, is this still happening? Where am I? And then I had to remind myself that I'm very much still in Jamaica, right? But I don't experience those things happening much anymore. So and I think I was mentioning to Chad the other day that like how I navigated Jamaica then is completely different from how I navigate it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I talk too much?
No. I think you were like spot on when you said like the thing with Chad too. Like you no longer are in Jamaica, so maybe things have changed, because I feel like every time I talk to Chad about it, I think it's a lot of like trauma that you experienced when you were younger, because I don't think Dervin, like based off like the little bit that Dervin's talked about and in his childhood, he didn't have parents that opposed like who you were, and like didn't like your parents were very accepting of like whatever you kind of wanted to do or be, and during the time of your childhood. I don't know like what happened when you came out, but like I feel like based on what Chad's told me about his experience as like a child and growing up like in middle school and high school, it was very different. Like his parents took it very differently than what your parents like did. Or
yeah, in that instance, I think the main difference is that's one of the main differences in just like how our parents is interpreted or like dealt with or perceived sexuality. Because like at that time, like you said, Dervin, like you never came out, you never really knew like how to describe yourself, you know. And the same for me, like, you know, there did become a time where like I did experiment, and like we've gone through that story. That's kind of how my parents found out, but they did not take well to it. And I do agree, Erica. I think that is a part of the trauma that I might still be dealing with in that regard. I think the next thing also is that I think you're right in that like when you're going home, like in your own community, you have a sense of safety there, because I could be wrong here, but I feel like a part of it is like people already know you. They've seen you like growing up and everything. So they're kind of used to you at this point, you know? I think in Spanish Town, like where I used to live, like that was one of the issues for me. Like people didn't know me. Like I just moved there at the time, and when I didn't really go out for people to interact with me. So I didn't really grow up there. I was there probably for like a year or two. So I think that's a part of the hostility where people saw this new guy and he didn't talk to them. He didn't look like, you know, how they look or how they act or whatever. I think that had a lot to do with my perceived hostility, like that I felt. I mean, it's not even perceived; it was hostile.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely real. The trauma is definitely there, and okay, so during this conversation, and it happens a lot where sometimes you actually forget what trauma or what things you've experienced or endured until someone triggers it, or until someone's actually mentioned something. So when you just described the differences, you know, with Chad and myself and the trauma, like it just occurred to me that, okay, so I lived in the UK for a year, and I think for the first 2 or 3 months when I was there, I would see a group of men and walk the other way because I do not know what they're going to do to me, and I was very fearful that they'll be homophobic towards me and abuse me or do whatever they are, or whatever it is that they felt like doing. And that came from the mere fact that in Jamaica, those are the challenges I would experience. So I would be in my own community and see a group of guys and walk the other way. So I could have a sense of safety.
Even in your own community.
Even in my own community. So I could have a sense of safety, meaning in my own community, I could feel it's unlikely that someone's going to do anything, but I still experience the verbal abuse. I still experience that fear of walking past a group of people because I'm not sure exactly what they're going to say or what they're going to do. Even if I've convinced myself that, okay, they're clearly not going to do anything, I'm literally going to walk the other way just in case. And sometimes it would mean that I'm walking the longer way home. It would mean that I'm walking the longer way home than, just walking a straight road to get where I'm going to. And I think in one aspect, when we're talking about family or parents, I think I may have had it better off than Janoy. But when it comes to the actual experience of, and this is not Operation Olympics, but I'm just going by based on, this conversations that Janoy and I have had. But based on type of abuse or what experience in high school, I think I might take the crown on that one because there are a few times, and I can talk about it now because I've lived it and I've gone through it. But there was a time when a group of guys surrounded me, and one of them had like this big board or this big, oh my God, plank. Is that an American way for me to describe it? Like a plank of wood or something, and it had nails in it. And they surrounded me and they wanted to attack me. So they were trying to hit me because they heard some rumors, and I kept blocking the hits with my arm. And luckily, the people in the neighborhood saw what was happening and kind of chased the guys away. And I quickly walked off because while the neighbors may have saved me, they had saved me from getting a potential beat down, but they did not know why the guys were trying to attack me. And I was not going to stay around for them to find out, because if they did, the neighbors, the community may say, all right, by all means, proceed, finish, or I'll even help you with. Do you want some more stones? Do you want some more nails? But yeah, and immediately after that, and these were guys that were in my same grade. These were persons who I had classes with. Some of them were even friends. And the next day when I went back to school, one of the guys who I guess regretted what he did came up to me afterwards to say that they have a knife. They brought a knife to school to do what they needed to do with me. And this was in my final year of school. And it was coming down to my graduation for me to leave school, and we're coming down to some exams. And it was a very stressful time for me, as you can imagine. And I remember the school did absolutely nothing. The school did nothing. I thought they were gonna have. So we spoke with the guidance counselor, and he was like, okay, he's gonna sort it out. And then he called this whole meeting with all the boys in the grade, and they were in this massive auditorium, and I walked
in there with them.
So I walked with the guidance counselor to the meeting, to that auditorium, because I was under the impression that he was going to address bullying and whatever. But when we got to the auditorium, all the guys started booing me as soon as I walked in the door. And the guidance counselor said nothing. And during the whole session, he did not address what had happened to me. So the school did absolutely nothing. And it felt really frustrating to know that at any moment I could have been attacked. Also, I was preparing for, at the time, perhaps the most important exams. And even there's this one exam that I was sitting in, and one of my bullies were sitting right beside me, and I think it was history class or something, and he just started saying all sorts of threats in the exam. Granted, he finished the exam after 10 minutes, and that kind of shows where his priorities were. He had to finish his exam in 10 minutes to focus the rest of the 90 minutes that he had to spare on me. But these are some of the horrific experiences that I've had. But I also have to be grateful that I've never been actually beaten. Like, I've never been in an actual fight because of my sexuality. I've experienced a lot of verbal attacks, and I think that's kind of like this fear that I now have of hearing someone say it. And I think what's also interesting, I could be hanging around with straight friends or even gay friends who are more masculine in persona, and people will say something and there are certain trigger words that you always pick up. Mm-hmm. So I could say Alexa right now, and this device kind of lights up. That was literally me. If I heard a word, I would immediately pick it up. And even if they're not talking about me, I would immediately feel uncomfortable. And there are times when I'll be around friends and I just immediately feel like I want to leave this space. And they're like, why are you why do you want to leave? Why have you all of a sudden become so withdrawn? And I would tell them, did you not hear what that guy just said? Or I heard something and I'm not sure they're talking about me, and all of a sudden I feel uncomfortable. And they're like, I didn't hear anything. And it's because of the reality that you live that I'm living something where I have lived something that has caused PTSD, that has caused some sort of trauma that I sometimes forget exists until I hear that trigger word that they're not aware of, because I live the experience and they don't.
You're talking about like more like current, like you going
Current, yeah. So like a friend of mine went on a road trip, and there's this stretch on the highway that we usually pull off just to kind of, take pictures and stuff. And there were some workmen working on the roads, and my friend was taking pictures of me. I was taking pictures of him, and I heard the workmen say something like fish or Batman, which are both derogatory terms for gay in Jamaica. And my friend didn't hear. And I immediately said, okay, let's pack up the camera and leave. And he was like, why are you rushing? I'm not done taking pictures. Like, let's just find another spot, please. And he was like, why? This spot is good. And when we got into the car, I explained to him that these guys were saying things, and it made me really uncomfortable, but he didn't hear it because he doesn't react to those words in the same way.
Yeah.
The trauma that Chadwick has since he left Jamaica is very much valid, because he left without seeing a change. So it wasn't a transition that he could, maybe forget that he has this trauma or this pain or whatever until something triggers him. It's like it was an abrupt ending. So you got up and you leave. So that is what sticks with you. For me, I kind of went through the transition to the point where I sometimes forget how I felt when I was being bullied. I sometimes forget that I was bullied. I sometimes forget the feeling that I had until I hear that sound, until I hear that word, until I hear that buzzword, that triggering word that really puts me in this very anxious state. And when it does hit, it hits hard. So if you hear someone just randomly say, batty boy or the gun sound, that immediately makes me feel like I'm being targeted, and all of those memories keep flooding back until maybe I get some rest, or I take the day and kind of take the day to get over it, prioritize other things. But the trauma is definitely there, and the PTSD is definitely there. A perfect example, there's this one song, Boom Bye Bye. Now, the singer for that, Buju Banton, has been forgiven, I guess, by a lot of people for recording that song. He has apologized for it. He's removed it from his catalog. He doesn't sing it anymore. But if I hear that song, no one can tell me that they're not singing about me. No one can tell me that this song is not specifically chosen to be directed at me, because that is just how I feel. It's so triggering. So it's kind of like just hearing that, just hearing those triggering words, just hearing those sounds. It could be that they're not talking about me. It could be that someone was just reacting to something. But because of what I went through, I automatically assume that it's me.
Yeah, and you made a good point that one of the differences in like you and our experiences as well as like our high schools, because like with my high school, I feel like it was much more, not so much liberal, but I guess it's just like the people that were there were more uptown. I mean,
that school did breed some of the most gays in Jamaica, so
second to KC probably.
Or George's maybe, but yeah.
So I didn't thankfully, for the most part, there were a few incidents for me, and more so for other people. Like I remember, like there was a really effeminate guy that went to school there, and they like one day for some reason, like they would always tease him and stuff, but one day for some reason they like everyone just started throwing bottles at him. Like all the guys just started throwing bottles at him in the auditorium. We were all gathering for like the school meeting or whatever. And I don't remember the teachers doing anything. Like the ones that were protecting him were more so his like friends. He hung out with like a lot of females, and they were protecting him at that point, So I definitely realize that. I can acknowledge that your experience is definitely different from me there. I think for me, my hardship was more so at home and just in my community and with my family, my extended family. So that I would say was different for me.
How old were you when you came out, Dervin?
You know, coming out in the Jamaican or the Caribbean context is very different than coming out in the US, right? So it's possible for people to be out to the public, but not out to their families. It's possible for people to be out to their friends, but not out to the public or not out to their families. It's very tricky. But when I say coming out, how I interpret your question was me coming out to my family, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I think there's a reason why I kind of like try to dissect that a bit, because we do have in Jamaica, or in the LGBT community in Jamaica, we do have our own way of saying, you know, are you out or whatever, because someone could say yes if they're out to all their best friends and they're out to everyone else, but if you ask them about their family, then that's a completely different thing. So I was 14 when I came out to my mother, and this was really a joke. And I tell this story all the time. I went to her and I said, "Mommy, I have something to tell you." And I literally had nothing to tell her. There was nothing on my mind. I just felt like annoying her. I was bored. So I went to her room. She's like, "Mommy, I have something to tell you." But I had nothing on the agenda. I had nothing to talk about. And she was like, "Okay, what is it?" And I think I was being dramatic or something. I was like, "Oh, I don't know how you're going to respond to it." But again, I literally had nothing to say. And she was like, "What is it?" I was like, "Oh, I'm joking. I have nothing to say." And then she was like, "No, what do you have to say? Tell me what the problem is." I was like, "There's nothing. I did not have anything to say." And she would just not let me leave. And I don't know where it came from, but this burst of emotions came over me. And I just started crying. And I was like, "Wait, what's going on here?" Because I literally came into this room with nothing on my mind. And now I'm here crying. And I said to her, "I think and I don't think I was able to finish it. I don't think I was able to finish the sentence, because I remember her saying, "Do you like people who are like you?" And I was like, "Well, that's a nice way to put it." And I just said, "Yes, I suppose I am. I suppose that is what the situation is." And she was like, "Well, that's something to pray about," because she's a Christian woman. And I was like, "I'm tired of praying. I'm tired of trying to change myself. I'm tired of all of this." And then she said, "Then stop. Then stop trying. You are who you are, and I love you, and that won't change. I love you for who you are." And I was like, "Well, that's easy." And I kind of got up and I left the room. And I was like, I still cannot believe what just happened, because I had no agenda. So my coming out story was really just her, because she's the one I officially came out to say, "I am who I am." And she said, "Be who you are." I also think I came out to my brother, and it is possible I came out to him before or after my mom. I can't recall. It may have been before, but the story really doesn't. I mean, he doesn't count. It's really my mother, right? Because he was living. He was living in the U.S.
How did he take
He was living in the U.S. So I did not officially come out to anyone else apart from my older brother who lived in the U.S. And when I did come out to him, I said, "Maybe I'm going through a phase," and he was like, "Dervin, you're not going through a phase. You are gay." And I was like, "Well, thanks." And he was also accepting, so my mother was also accepting. So the persons that actually said I am gay too in my family are my brother and my mom. I think everyone else just kind of realized I'm not bringing home a girl. I was still very effeminate. I was doing all these kind of crazy things to my hair when I'm at home. And then they eventually just accepted. They've never asked me about a girlfriend. They never did. And also when I started doing my human rights work in Jamaica, and being more public and open about my sexuality, I think that became a bit more clear to them. I wrote an article back in 2015, just talking about my experience with homophobic bullying, and it was published in the newspaper. Now, how I wrote the article was not me admitting to my sexual orientation. It was not me admitting to anything, but just talking about how I was bullied because I was effeminate. The newspaper decided to publish the article with the title "Gay Man Tells His Story," and my name was there and everything.
Oh my God.
I feel like I should have used that opportunity to just not be in Jamaica. Let me not say anything else. But let me not say anything else. But that was the right time, you know? And when I saw it, I told my mom, and she was like, you should sue and see if you can get some money. And I was like, okay, my father's friends might see this, so let me just go tell my father. And I told my father about the article, and I told him what the title was. And he just laughed and he said, okay. And that was that.
Wow.
So my immediate family, like, they've always been supportive. My brothers would, I mean, we have a very unique relationship. There's one brother that lives in the US who I've always told about my sexuality. My youngest older brother, I'm the youngest of 4 boys. My brother, who I was really close with growing up, he would always tell me that he loves me at random moments. I remember when I was living in London, I had in like these long gray braids that I did for Pride. And I think I posted this picture of me having like this sign that says "Live Out Loud," and I was in this very short shorts and like this tank top that just had this cut down the side in the middle, and I posted it on my profile, and my brother responded to it saying, "Yes, my little brother, live your true self," and I was like, "Oh,
Oh my God. So sweet.
But yeah, so it's so officially coming out was really when I actually said the words, or when my mother helped me to say the words to her. And I think from there it just kind of went, you know, how it should go. There are some family members. I think there was a sister that I had that asked me. We didn't grow up together, and she's much older than I am. She asked me if I was gay, and I told her yes. And she was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Girl, I do not have time. Okay, I've gone through with my family. My immediate family accepts me. My brothers who I was raised with accept me. My parents accept me. I've passed it. I've never actually had to question it. So I'm not here to go back into the shadows of homophobia to deal with this with you. I appreciate that you're having difficulties accepting this because of the society that you're raised in, but you're just gonna have to take the time to deal with that, because I don't have the time to help you to deal with it because I've moved past that, right?" And she came back to me like a couple of days later saying, "I accept you. It's just," basically what she was trying to explain, what I understand, that she's not used to someone saying that they're gay. She's not used to homosexuality, so to speak. And I said, "That's perfectly fine, my dear. No, we can move on from this. If you have any more questions that are not problematic, you can ask, but, you know, probably do your own research first." But yeah, that was my that was my coming out story. I think coming out to the world was a bit more gradual. I think, Jano, you remember this, when I was 16 thereabout, I was going to parties every week, and I was like this mini party promoter. I had an image to uphold then, so I was trying my very best to not be gay. But then rumors would hear from my school, like person who went to my school would see me going to these parties, and they would say, "Oh, he's probably gay or something." And there were whispers, but I tried to kind of silence them or just not acknowledge them. But then eventually I just did not care anymore. I just started being myself. And I think it became a bit more apparent when I left to the UK, where I think I just kind of flourished. I became this new person. If I wanted to do something, I felt like there was no limitations in me doing it. I just got up and did it. I braided my hair like 3 times. And when I talk about braiding my hair, I'm talking about long ass braids, because why the hell not, you know? And it was a welcoming and enabling space that I was able to do that in, and I didn't experience homophobia at all, at least not to my face. So I think that was the peak for me in 2017, 2018, when I just kind of embraced who I am and all versions of me. The fact that I can just get up and do what I wanted, I think that was really my coming out to the world. Even though I was working a lot more with LGBT advocacy before then, and I was kind of making announcement that I am gay before then. But I think that was that year that really solidified in me that this is who I am. And I have many versions of who I am. I might not do the long braids ever again, but I did it. And if I wanted to, I feel like I could just get up and do it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
I wanted to ask, what was the like difference, or like what did you have any fears of like moving to the UK, or like any, you know, idea, like what were you expecting?
I was just expecting freedom. To be honest, I did not expect that I would have become that liberate. I would have had that much of a liberating experience. But it kind of made me realize that there's a world outside of Jamaica. And funny enough, I visit the US every year multiple times, to the point where your immigration people are now questioning why I'm traveling to the US so much. But feel free to cut this out, because I really do not want them to ask me about it the next time I do travel. But I don't feel that way when I'm in the US, because I still feel like you mentioned before that homophobia exists, and then because we're so exposed to American culture that you can see when the homophobia happens, and I'm very fearful that I'm going to have it there. With the UK, I did not have that much of it. I did not have that fear. I had the PTSD when I first got there. I was like very nervous about doing certain things, but eventually when I settled down and I kind of start living in the UK as if it's my place of birth, it's my home, that's when I became a bit more expressive. So going to the UK, I just wanted to be free. I wanted a new experience. I wanted to leave Jamaica, but I did not expect that I would have had such a liberating experience, or just like this liberating lifestyle when I was there. And it's a period that I would never forget. And I think while me navigating Jamaica now is completely different than how it was when I was younger, I think the reason why I can feel like I can navigate Jamaica in the way that I do now is because, to some extent, of what I did in the UK. But at the same time, I know that I'm still limited. I cannot experiment in the way that I want to. I can't just be, and this doesn't have to be like a sexual orientation related thing. It's just simply being, or just getting up and being spontaneous is not possible here as much, because places are far, the transport system isn't reliable. There's elitism in certain spaces are just not accessible. But in the UK, whether it's just me getting up and taking a bus and going across the country, or going for a walk and encountering a park, or just getting up and saying, okay, I'm going to wear nail polish this week. And I remember just saying that I wanted nail polish. I don't remember what nail polish I wanted. I went to this store, and they had the nail polish like in this bucket, and I could not choose. And I remember just taking up 10, because they're like a pound each. I took up 10, and I colored my nails with different colors because I just could not choose. And that's like a symbol of the life I was living. Just getting up, saying that I wanted to do something. I'm not sure how it's going to end, but I see all these options, and I realize I don't have to choose one. I can take all the options, and I can leave the store, and I can deliver what I want and not have to worry about when I go outside. That is kind of like that option that I want to continue living. And having been in the UK, having not planned to have the year that I did, it kind of put things into perspective for me about what makes me happy, what makes me flourish, what makes me feel excited. And so when I think about my future now, that's what's solid in my mind.
Do you think you see yourself staying in Jamaica, like long term?
No. And it's so weird, because when I came back, there was a moment where I feel like I cannot stay here, because I need money to be able to have the accessibility and freedom that I had in the UK. In the UK, I didn't need to drive. I could just take a bus and go there because that was reliable. I could, if I wanted to go to, I don't know, somewhere, I could just get a bus and go there. I could do it, or I could walk, because it's a very walking country, right? In Jamaica, when I came back, I wasn't driving, and for me to say, okay, I wanted to go to the beach, or I wanted to go to to a river, or go on a hike, it would be virtually impossible for me to do that without getting someone who drives. And so when I came back, and I also thought about the freedom and the freedoms that I would have by just being myself, experimenting and being in a space, I did not have that. So when I came back, I immediately just wanted to leave. I didn't want to be in Jamaica. And then when I started driving and I started getting this job that kind of paid me somewhat relatively well, I was able to do things. I was able to do more things. If I wanted to go for a drive, I didn't have to take the bus or wait for a bus or ask a friend. I would just get in a car and drive. If I wanted to dress a particular way, I probably could because I'm going to a workplace that is enabling, and I'm also driving, so no one needs to see what I'm wearing, right? But now I'm realizing that I can only go so far, and everything that I do is still so very calculated. So at this point, I don't see myself living in Jamaica long term, and that's not purely on the basis of sexual orientation. It's just that my opportunities or my options feel so restricted and so limited here. Something as simple as going to the doctor when I was in the UK was just a wonderful experience. I'll go to the doctor and they'll remember who I am and say, "Hey, Dervin, so the last time you were here, you were preparing for exams. How's that going?" I remember this old lady, old enough to be my grandmother, was giving me like this sex ed talk, and she was like, "So are you into fisting? Are you into?" And I was like, "Girl, what are you asking me?" And she was like, "I know I'm old enough to be your grandmother, but I do know these things." And it was like this whole conversation, and I don't get that here, right? And so even when you ask the question, do I see myself living long term in Jamaica? It's not just from a sexual standpoint, because then I could probably look to the US as well. But I feel like just what I've been exposed to through media, or even just me being there, I would still not get that liberating experience in the US. So I'd probably go back to where I'm used to, which is the UK. That gave me that moment of thinking and believing that opportunities are endless, or if you want to do something, you can get up and do it. And I think that's what I'm searching for, that accessibility, that freedom, that liberating life that I can no longer get in Jamaica. I no longer see myself getting that in Jamaica. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, the answer is no. I do not see myself living long-term in Jamaica. It'll always be my home. And I think I always want to have a place here, but
to live,
not to live forever.
I can identify with that. Like Erica was asking me earlier too, like if I could see myself living there, and I don't think so, especially not right now and probably not anytime soon. I would want to get a house there eventually, maybe like an investment property where like if I wanted to visit, I could go there, but I don't think I'd want to live there. So it's definitely been like I think it's been better for me being in the US, but just dealing with a lot of the trauma that I went through in Jamaica, I feel like that still plays out in a lot of ways. Like even in, for me and Jordan, like us being married and living here, you'd kind of expect that we'd be holding our hands and stuff, but we still find ourselves like holding ourselves back because we still worry about showing PDA in public and how people will perceive that. And even beyond like the whole like our sexuality and navigating that in the US, I feel like maybe it's different in the UK, but I feel like I also have to navigate being Black here in the US versus in Jamaica, where it's a majority Black, but it's still a pretty diverse country. But that wasn't something you necessarily had to worry about or like think about, like, you know, in that sense. So I definitely think I'm still dealing with a lot of the trauma that I was dealing with when I was younger, especially growing up in Jamaica. But what would you say? Like, how do you think you're navigating like your trauma, like your experiences from growing up compared to now? So how do you think you, like in your current space and like currently, how do you think you navigate the trauma and just your experiences of, you know, what you went through when you were younger with homophobia and at school?
So I don't think I've completely learned how, well, I navigate it now by avoiding certain spaces. I can afford, or I'm in a better position right now to avoid certain spaces. So that's how I navigate the Jamaican, that's how I navigate Jamaica in that's how I navigate Jamaica now. But also, I have to be mindful of the fact that Jamaica isn't as homophobic as it was, you know, when I was dealing with it 10 years ago. Right? It's not like that space anymore, and so it's easier for me to navigate. So I'm not even sure if I'm navigating or people are just not reacting in the same way as they did before. Because let's just say, you know, 10 years ago, I'd be on the road and I would hear someone say something homophobic a few times, right? Now I don't hear it. And even when I wasn't driving and I was taking the buses or whatever it was, I would rarely hear someone say anything homophobic. So it could just be that I'm just not seeing it anymore. But I have to also be mindful of the fact that I'm in a different position now where I'm able to avoid it. I The only time I leave the house is when I'm in the car and I'm sheltered. And I go straight to work, and then I leave and I come home. If I'm going anywhere else, I'm going to a space where I'm not going to be. I'm not going to experience any sort of harassment or anything like that. So if I go to a restaurant, it's a proper restaurant. If I go out with friends, you know, we're going to safe spaces. So that's one way in which I navigate. But I cannot say that I've completely moved on or reconciled what has happened in the past, because I am still triggered by certain things. I'm triggered by hearing sounds or words that aren't even being thrown at me. And if I had fully moved on from the trauma that I experienced in the past, I don't think that I would get so jittery whenever I hear someone, says fish or says Batman or says anything homophobic or could be understood to be homophobic towards me. I would not be feeling that sort of anxiety if I'd fully moved on. When I was younger, however, dealing with it meant trying to be someone else. And it started when I was in primary school, where I would feel good whenever I did something that was considered to be a boy thing to do, and people would realize it. So I told a story about when I was driving. Like, I started pretending like I was driving. I was walking, but I was making the sounds like vroom vroom or whatever it is that whatever sounds cars make. And a friend of mine saw me and be like, "Oh my God, Dervin, you're becoming a boy." And I remember feeling so excited about that because I'm now going to be considered normal, I guess. Because at the time, I was being treated as if I was not normal. I was being treated as if I was who I was not the right thing to be. And so whenever I got some sort of validation from other people that made me feel as if I was normal, I would actually feel that and embrace that. But that wasn't intentional though. So I didn't intentionally try to come off as boyish. But when it came naturally, it felt good. And I think when I transferred to high school, the lessons that I learned from primary school about how people perceive you and how they would react in a much better way if you behave a particular way. When I was in high school, I intentionally then tried to be someone else. So when I started high school, I did summer school and I tried to be very quiet because usually I could say one or two words that sounds masculine, with a deep voice. But beyond those two words, my high pitch voice would drop in, and my effeminate colloquialisms, I guess, would take over. And people then start looking at me strangely at that point. So during that time at summer school, I would just not speak. And there was this guy that said to me, "Why are you behaving? You're behaving so effeminate. You're behaving so girly because you're not speaking as much. You're behaving shy." And I was like, "Wait, what? I'm literally not doing anything. I'm just breathing, and you're making me feel uncomfortable." And so there are times and in different grades where I literally just started to change who I was or change my physical appearance. And I became a truant. My grades became poor. I started bleaching my skin. I started dyeing my hair and curling it and wearing fitted clothing. And again, for context, in Jamaica, there are some men who come off as that, who have that appearance of the bleached skin, the dyed hair, the pitch black hair, the curled hair, the fitted clothing. But no one really questions their masculinity because they're from a particular community that understands that this is a part of their masculine persona. But that doesn't apply when you are an effeminate person doing the same thing that they're doing. It just makes things worse for you. And so it did make things worse for me in high school. And I think going towards the later parts of high school, I stopped doing all of that. Like I stopped changing who I was. I stopped actively changing who I was and just accepted that, you know, this is me. And I dealt with the consequences that came after that. So navigating at the time was really me just trying to be someone else, trying to fit in as much as possible. And if I'm being honest, those are the most uncomfortable experiences. I remember even in primary school when we had these parties and all the girls and the guys would then conjoin to dance. And oh my God, because you know when heterosexuals are dancing, the man is behind and the girl is and the woman is in front. And that's literally what happened when, you know, we're in primary school. And I did not want to be the one who was behind. I wanted to be the one who was in front. I wanted to be the one to be, you know, moving my body in very seductive ways, but I could not do that. And the added pressure of wanting to do it with a girl when I know that it felt awkward and uncomfortable, but I just had to do it. Like these pressures of being someone that you're not, starting from primary school where you felt like you could not even talk to anybody about what you're feeling, leading up to high school when it becomes even more glaring that you have to conform and there's no opportunity for you to sway from that. It became extremely difficult. And if I could think back, that's probably some of my worst, my more anxiety triggering moments where I felt like I just could not be myself. So when I went to university, I think that sort of changes because the university I went to was a homosexual mecca. Like that was where all the gays congregated. I don't want to call them names because I don't want this to go anywhere.
We'll make sure to add.
But yeah, so when I went to UN, I started having more gay friends because in high school I only had one. And when I got to university, like I had a lot more. In high school, actually, I had two. Sorry, Janoy. Okay. At the actual high school, I only had one. But when I went to UA, I had them all in the same space. So Janoy came to the university. I had a whole bunch of friends. I started expressing myself a bit more. That's when I had my first real relationship, but even that was a surprise for me because UE was like this safe haven. And I remember one of my shocking experiences is when I finished that 4 years at UE, at the university. When I left and I started working, I realized that Jamaica is still very homophobic. Because when I was at UE, it was like the safe space. So you experience homophobia, but you know that no one's actually gonna act on their homophobia because you're at this space that is supposed to be embracing. But once I finished school and I left and I realized now I'm back in the real world, it felt like I was starting high school all over again. So that was also an experience for me. But at the time, I started working a lot more LGBT advocacy, human rights advocacy. So the spaces that I had access to were very supportive. But again, I wasn't being my true self, and I did not know what my true self was until I got to the UK. But yeah, generally navigating back then was really just me trying to be someone else. Navigating now is a completely different experience. It's something more of a choice of me, you know, ignoring certain spaces and having the option to choose not to be in certain spaces. Because when I was younger, I didn't have that. I had to go to school. I had to go to those harmful environments. I could not do anything about the abuse that I was facing because, like I mentioned before, the school did nothing. But where I am now, where I work, if I experience homophobia, something can be done. I'm in a space where I can be myself because if I'm not myself, something can be done, right? If I don't want to interact with a particular crowd of persons, I don't have to. I would interact with them if I want to, and if I want to, I can prepare myself for that. You know, I can take the time to process and say, okay, what needs to go into this for me to prepare. But I also think what is very important, and it's something that I cannot ignore, is the fact that I have the option to get up and leave if something were supposed to happen, and it's just so very different from when you're younger, where you just have to stick to the abuse that you're going through. So I suppose, and I think, Chad, I was asking you this question yesterday, like, does it really get better, or do you just get better at of navigating these spaces? And I think they're probably one and the same. It does get better depending on the situation that you're in, because I am mindful that there's some people who are still working in a very harmful space where they can't do anything. They don't have the choice of getting up and leaving. They don't have the choice of making a report if someone does something to harm them, because they might find themselves even being placed in harm's way even more. But for me, it has gotten better because of the position that I'm now in, where I can get up and leave. I can choose not to go to a particular space. I've created this bubble of support. I've created this environment, an enabling environment that allows me to flourish in no matter what direction that I want to go, with some restrictions, obviously, because, like I said, I can't just get up and wear nail polish as how I want to anymore. I probably could, but then I still have to be mindful that I do have to interact with the Jamaican public. But just managing life at the moment is much better than when it was when I was younger.
When you were in high school, do you think you ever had to like have a girlfriend? I don't remember. When I knew you, I don't remember you having a girlfriend, but did you ever?
Well, let me just say, no, I didn't feel pressure to have a girlfriend, but I did mix around with a few. I did mix around with a few girls here or there. Nothing sexual though, just kissing and stuff like that. I know it always felt awkward because I do not want. I remember there was this girl that was upset about something, and I had to be the one to go to you and make you feel better or find out why you're upset. I don't have time for that. And also there was this whole thing about having conversations with them, because again, my voice changes and I cannot be this. I think being in a relationship with a woman, how I understood it at the time was that I had to be this masculine person, and I could not be that person. I could not be that person. So even when I was around these girls for longer periods, it felt so uncomfortable trying to think in my head what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it before I actually say it. It's like I'm translating things in my head before it comes out of my mouth. And sometimes it would slip up. Like, can you just imagine you're like, oh, what's up, baby? How you doing? And then at one point you're like, oh, girl, no. Where are you going with that? I was like, can you just imagine like the struggle of trying to keep things together? But it also felt for me unusual. Like I knew it wasn't me, and I knew I was engaging with these girls, knowing that there was no end in sight. And I think for the two that I'm thinking about, I probably ghosted them. One of them right now is I think is happily married, and it's still very awkward for me to see her because I know she knows who I am, and the fact that I know that she knows what I was even then and now makes me feel uncomfortable seeing her.
Yeah, because I mean, for me in high school, I think that's one of the ways that I use to navigate the space. Because at Arden, I did have several girlfriends.
Oh, several. Look at you. Okay.
Maybe not several, but like maybe 2 or 3. I mean, still several,
A
but
couple.
yeah. But I think that allowed me to have that feel more normal and have that more heteronormative relationship with like my friends, my male friends, and they could maybe overlook my voice at that time, because like at that time I remember people used to say I sounded like my sister.
What?
And then at that same time too, one of the ways that I started to cope was to deepen my voice. I feel like that's one of the reasons I kind of talk like this now. It just kind of became a habit more so than just my voice developing. But yeah, I do remember like a phase like going through that. And then after my last girlfriend, that's when I started to stalk you at that point and getting boyfriends and like stuff like that. But still having to navigate that in the context of a Jamaican society of not being able to be public, you know, just for my safety. And then having to go back to somewhere like, I mean, I think at that time I was living in Portmore, but ultimately I was going back to Spanish Town where it was even worse. And just having to navigate that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna ask, how's dating in? I'm like, anyway, how's like dating in Jamaica? Are there certain areas where, you can be in an open relationship or
like public?
Yeah.
Okay, so it definitely is possible, and I think there are a lot more gay relationships in Jamaica, like gay relationships or LGBT relationships that you know that they're in a relationship, that the public may know, or at least there's some inclination that there is a relationship going on. I think it's happening a lot more frequently now. People aren't hiding as much, and even if they don't say anything, if you go on their profile, like you can tell, like some cheeks are being clapped, right? But because of the experience that I had before now, where because I was this effeminate person, I felt like I could not be in a relationship or be in a relationship publicly in the way that I would like, where persons would just they would want to shy away from being even walking beside me. They don't have to be PDA. We don't have to be holding hands, but we can't walk beside each other. Or they can't let people know that they're friends with me because they don't want to be associated with anything that I had to deal with. That is something that I experienced when I was much younger, and I think that stuck with me. And for now, at the moment, I don't date in Jamaica. I don't navigate the dating scene in Jamaica because I still hold on to this perception that I cannot do it. And also, if I'm being honest, I feel like I'm popular. I'm known to some extent. And unless, of course, this person who I'm going to date, either one knows absolutely nothing about me or two knows everything about me and is perfectly fine with that. Yeah, I don't navigate the dating scene a lot now in Jamaica because of these fears based on experiences that I've had in dating when I was much younger. So I find myself looking to other countries, for companionship or relationships and stuff like that, because I just don't feel like I would be able to get it in Jamaica, especially in the way that I want. I want the lovey-dovey thing. I mean, I was in Philadelphia for 2 weeks, and I can tell you the pictures and stuff that I was posting with someone who I'm not even in a relationship with. So that kind of shows you how much I desire and yearn for this kind of public PDA, this public kind of ownership. Or if it's not even that public, that there's some things that I can do with you that it's not going to make me feel as if you're hiding me or that you're shying away from me. And I know for sure that can happen in Jamaica because I'm seeing it happen every day. And sometimes I do get a bit jealous, but I've moved on because I've held on to this. I'm not dating in Jamaica for so long. It has now become a fixed thing in my plan that I'm not going to be with anybody in Jamaica.
So you still have access to like apps like Grindr and...
Oh, for sure. And sometimes if I feel excited, I will put my picture up. But again, this is always like an experiment. When I have my face up on Grindr, people will not, there's sometimes people just not respond or message you. There was one time that someone actually said to me that me showing my face means that I'm careless, I'm irresponsible, and that I'm this out and about person that's going to cause dramas. And granted, this was a long time ago, but that was said. But the fact that that was said about me being open kind of made me feel like I do not have the time to deal with a particular type of mindset when it comes to dating. I've moved on from that, and I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm going to find myself being closeted again or having a secret relationship, because I don't want that. And so while I'm aware and I can accept that these things are no longer happening, and that, you know, it really just means that you need to find the right person, I don't think I have the patience for it. I don't think I have the patience to try to find who that person is.
And like from my experience, or like when I was back in Jamaica with Grindr and all that, my perception of like people not showing their faces was more so because they were worried that, you know, straight people will join that and they'll be able to see your photo and then out you and create all sorts of drama and stuff. So, you know, so is that something you think you're fearful of now, or you think that's a bit more paranoia?
Oh no, because I don't fear it, and I do understand when other people say it, but I'm also in a completely different space or frame of mind. So when persons say that they are DL, or they don't want to show me who their picture, they show me who they are on these dating apps, then I don't mind it, but just know that you're not going to meet up with me. I would leave it there. I would leave where the conversation is, because this is where you are in your life and I'm just not there. I don't have an issue with my face being shown. Just that if I post my picture, don't expect anything, don't expect any nudes or anything, because I don't know who you are. So people would greet me by just sending a sexual image and expect one in return. If my face wasn't showing, then by all means I would send you that. But I don't know who I'm talking to. And so you're not gonna have my face, and then you're gonna have this nude, and then you're gonna
put a face to
post it on these on Twitter or something, because a lot of these bait pages are popping up. But generally I'm not too worried about, you know, straight people seeing, because where I am right now, people know. And if you don't know, I mean, that's on you. Yeah, there is something that is there that I have to address and be honest about, that has to do with you and also another friend. I'm darker skinned, effeminate, and I've never quite figured out exactly what that unique thing is about me that attracts people. And I have to be honest, when I was younger, a lot of these things mattered. When I joined these dating apps, the early dating chat rooms, that there's this phone company had called Digital, where you join these chat rooms via text. Mm-hmm. And when you describe the person, so this was before Facebook or picture messaging or anything like that. So you had to describe yourself in words to see if you can get a response. And the people who the description that person would always jump at was light-skinned, masculine. They always had the bow legs or whatever it is, and those are the things that would get people to feel like they want. Those were the ideal type of gays that people wanted. And being friends with you, and also being friends with my other friend who meet those criteria, I felt, and I've always still feel like I would just not be good enough. Like, I'm not the guy that these Jamaican men want. And it's not even in Jamaica, whereas I experienced it in the UK as well, where there's this kind of like fat phobia, and I've always had issues with my weight. There's this light skin issue, or where they want someone who's light skinned or masculine or all of that. And when I find that I sometimes don't check those boxes, I find myself feeling as if I cannot be with someone, or that there's like this self-esteem issue that comes over me. And that played a lot in Jamaica, where I feel like, okay, maybe the reason why I can't find someone who's going to stick around with me or whatever it was is because I just don't fit the criteria that a lot of these people want. Now that could very much be me just being in my head, and it's not a true reality or a true picture of what is actually happening out there. But the fact that I feel that way and the fact that it has stuck with me has affected me greatly in how I navigate relationships or how I navigate friendships and how I view myself within an LGBT space, right? Because I can see myself as a pretty good looking average or maybe above average guy in the general population. But when it comes down to the gay community, there are certain criteria like you feel like you have to meet to be what is considered to be attractive, and that's the slimness, the masculinity. If you're light skinned, that's always a plus. If you have something else that kind of triggers you. So Jano, you had the voice. My friend had the hair or the body or the muscular or the muscles. Oh, by the way, Jano, you had the voice and the eyes. And my friend had and my friend has everything else. And being in the same space has always been something I'm very like sensitive to, like I'm very aware of. And that has always affected me feeling, okay, maybe I'm not attractive enough. I don't put myself out there as much. When I would go to a party, and we have been to parties before, or even when we're on social media, where I literally don't when I post his picture, I don't tag him. And I hope he doesn't comment. Because in the past, when I did, people who I've never spoken to before or had never commented on my things would comment just because I posted his picture, or they'll ask me who my friend is. There was this person who had the audacity to go on my page and like every picture that I had with Janoy and did not like any picture of me. And I still remember who that person is. And I don't talk to them because I remember what they did. But it's things like that that just kind of affected how I view myself, and I think it affected my approach to wanting relationships.
I was gonna say that's like really interesting that you said that, because we had like an episode with my friend Joe, and that's literally what we talked about for like an hour, like the gay culture in America. And it's interesting that that's like kind of the same situation in Jamaica as well, with like being that like in dating apps, they want you to be either like lighter skin, masculine, just like carry all those like masculine traits, and more like European traits as well.
Yes, it's definitely something I have to acknowledge, because I think it is true in our society that, you know, the light skin, the masculineness, especially in the gay community, that's something that people value. Even though for me personally, I've still struggled with my own body image. But people probably don't even see that, like looking from the outside looking in, you know, they just see the light skin and the eyes and whatever, and that does it. Cause like, I know you mean like I do get comments about like, you remember when I was in college at UE and I dyed my hair blonde or whatever. And I remember sometime after that, I posted another photo. My hair was just black, like regular, like as it is now. And somebody was like, "Oh, that's how you should do your hair." Don't, like, pretty much saying I shouldn't go back to doing it was more effeminate, and I need to come off as more masculine. So it's definitely something that I've seen myself in society and in the Jamaican society specifically. But I don't want you to feel that way.
And I think that a lot of people struggle with that. Like, I don't think even like, I think it's definitely a lot more common with the Black communities, because obviously they're the ones who are marginalized the most. But I feel like even with me, there was like one time that I was like in middle school, and I was talking to this guy, and he was like, and then somebody pointed out and were like, "Oh, you like Erica," or something like that. And then he's like, "No, I don't like Mexicans." And then like that made me feel like there was something wrong with me. So I think it's just like, I think anyone who's not white struggles with that internally to a certain extent.
And
Mhm.
I think it's maybe not just you that feels that. Like I said, Joe came on the episode and like spoke out on that. I think it's like something that white people and like people like maybe like Chad, like lighter skinned people that fit those criteria need to kind of like change or help like change that type of like culture.
Yeah. I would also say though, and I probably won't go too much into it, that it has actually caused me to have some in reflecting just some of the things that we have gone through, and also some of the things that I've gone through my other friends. I realize that I've gotten to the point of sabotaging my relationships with friends because I wanted to prove that I'm worthy enough of, being with someone that is attracted to you, for example, right? Um, so it's kind of interesting how much it transcends and affects the life that you live. I know I have to remind myself that don't put your friendships at risk because of you need some sort of validation or something. But yeah, I said I wasn't going to go too much into that. I think at some point you and I would probably have that conversation, with a lot of tissues and coming clean. But yeah, like this whole body image thing, or what is acceptable in gay society, and like you mentioned, I know for sure that it's not just happening, with people who are black, but also in other races. And I suppose it depends on where you go. That is even heightened. Like if someone who perhaps is Latinx, is that if someone who's, yeah, Latinx, came to Jamaica and they had their picture up, for sure, because of the type of society that we're living in, they would immediately be catapulted to like this to the top of the gay food chain because of their exoticness, so to speak. But I feel like in whatever context I go in, I always find myself being at the bottom of that pyramid. And I think, in all fairness, I'm not as dark as I'm coming up. But then even within the black gay community, you have the light skin. Well, in Jamaica, you have um, brown and black, and both are black, right? But in the US, you have light skin, brown skin, and dark skin, right? And you still have that hierarchy even within your own race. So I've always found that whether I'm in brown skin category or dark skin category, I can't shake this feeling as if I'm still at the bottom of that pyramid. And it has really affected how I view myself, and feeling to some extent that why would someone want me when they could probably have a child, or they could probably have another friend, or whoever it is, right? I always feel like I'm just not that good enough. And I think that has some role to play in how I view relationships, specifically in Jamaica.
Yeah, I can get that. Because I think, from my experience at least, although there isn't racism, I feel like in Jamaica, I feel like there's a lot of colorism. And
Yeah.
it plays out a lot more even in the gay community, in dating. And like you were saying, that there are elements of that in the black community here, where I feel like are, exhibit these colorist ideals.
Yeah.
So it's very challenging though, but I do have to acknowledge, and that's one thing I struggle with personally, just the fact that I do kind of have that privilege.
You got that pretty privilege.
But it's weird because
Yeah.
even though I do have that privilege, so to speak, I still feel like I struggle with a lot, which it doesn't make sense for me, where, I feel like I look at people on social media and they have the
like when
same
I
light
see-
skin and masculineness, and
Yeah.
they're fine. Like, they're living their best lives and everything,
No, I think like anyone can really struggle. Like it doesn't really matter if you're like as a society, yes, or like as a community, I think we have that like the colorism and all that, but I think individually we all like have insecurities and we don't see what others are seeing. Like I see a lot of like Black women on social media and I get really insecure because I'm like I love their like brown like gold like glowy skin and like I would be like so insecure about like my yellowish skin. So I think it's like something that everyone as an individual struggles with because of what society and our own community has put in our heads from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Are you rolling a joint right now?
Oh no.
I need to pay attention. I thought you were like having candy or something.
No.
Like for after this meeting, like
After this stressful as fuck meeting.
Having like been to the UK and traveled as extensively as you have outside of Jamaica and seen other cultures, what do you think, or do you even think that there is a simple solution or any solution to the homophobia that still exists in Jamaica in some cultures? Because like even I recognize and acknowledge that there has been progress in Jamaica in maybe just how people are now able to see a lot more diverse people. So a lot more gay people on social media, like because there is social media now being where it's more accessible for everyone. Maybe that does play a part, but do you think that there's any solution to the homophobia that still exists, you know, especially keeping in mind the music and the culture that is popular there with people like Popcorn and Vibes Cartel, who still to some extent perpetuate that like you know that mindset. Like recently I listened to Popcorn's album and I noticed that it was a big thing kind of where he left out the number 2 because the number 2 is you know kind of associated with anything that's homosexual. So he literally, you know, so that underlying mindset is still there for a lot of people. So what do you think about that, or how do you think?
To be honest, I don't know if there's like this simple solution. I think it's really just time and making steps towards a better society, whether it's through, you know, suspending murder music. I think we don't have a lot of homophobic music as we did like 10 years ago or even 15 years ago. That has changed, and I think that has come through a lot of advocacy and a lot of pressure from whether it's local sources or international sources. I think there's also a lot of role to play from the government side to ensure that you have a political system or a type of leadership in the country that embraces difference. The Prime Minister of Barbados,
Mia Motley,
the other day said she had this ruling, and she kind of mentioned that there was some question there about, you know, whether the ruling applied to LGBT couples or LGBT, you know, people. And she had this press conference and she was like, this government is not going to discriminate against anybody, whether you're sexual, whether you're gay, whether you're a lesbian, whether you're this or whether you're that. This applies to you as well. And that sort of leadership leads people in the right way. But I think there's a lot that has to do with cultural shifts. So the LGBT organizations here that are doing their thing, the LGBT people individually who are doing their thing, the allies who are doing their thing, that is encouraging a shift in how people understand and respond to homophobia, does have a lot to play. But I do have to be mindful as well that it does take time. Like I've been to the UK and I've also been, I think, another country that I experienced the most exhilarating LGBT experience was in Brazil. And before I even went there, when I Googled homophobia in Brazil, Brazil was, pretty homophobic. Like they were up there. And I remember having this big thing. I was like, oh my God, why? I was planning on getting my hair done in black and white, and I wanted to go to Brazil and just do all the things. And then I Googled and I realized that Brazil has this homophobia problem. And I was so nervous about going there. And the first time I got to Brazil, there was this carnival event that I stumbled on. And when I went, I saw trans women and drag queens. And I was like, is this a part of a carnival? Like I remember that was the first thing that I thought, like, okay, maybe this type of behavior is a part of the carnival culture. Mm-hmm. And then I saw men kissing in public. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait, hold on now. This is not what I researched, right? And I eventually found someone there. I remember us kissing like in public and just doing the most. I would be walking through some communities and guys would compliment me because I had the braids in and everything. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting that people would call guys with specifically, even though they're speaking a completely different language. But when you want someone, language is no barriers. You're going to understand that they want you. And I remember them saying certain things or reacting to me, and that kind of surprised me. One, I did not expect that LGBT people would be so open in Brazil. And two, I did not think that they would be responsive to a dark-skinned person like me with my hair done the way it was. But guys would come up to me and tell me, oh, they love my hair. And this also happened in the UK. A lot of straight guys would say, oh, I love your hair. And I was like, wait, what's happening here? I'm not used to this. But I think that also kind of makes me, the Brazil lesson that I had to experience it for myself is a part of the reason why I have to be so mindful in the stories that we tell about our own countries, because there are a lot of tolerant and accepting people in Jamaica. And while we have to be very nuanced in ensuring that we're telling the truth, mm-hmm. and whatever that truth is, whether it's someone who lives in an inner city community who is still experiencing homophobia by his neighbors, someone who lives in a very uptown community that cannot be themselves because they're going to risk getting their inheritance, someone like me who doesn't experience homophobia that much because when I come home, I am in a safe space and I drive to where I'm going. All stories are true, and we have to paint a very valid picture about what the situation is in order for us to move on. Because the truth is, a lot of LGBT people from the US can come to Jamaica and not experience a homophobic experience or not experience homophobia. And that happens for many Jamaicans here as well. But how do we document that and show the progress that the country is making? And is that possible to show Jamaicans that we are making progress? Would that be a bad thing for them to see, or would it be a good thing? Would they say, okay, see, we're not that bad, and kind of live up to that, we're not that bad? Or they would see that, oh, we're not that bad, this cannot be. We have to kind of show them that we are that bad, kind of. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I'm making sense there. Like, Jamaicans can either receive tolerance in two ways. See, we're not that bad and continue trying to not be bad. Or two, no, Jamaica we bond this and we bond that, and so we're going to continue doing that. And so I think just going to Brazil and learning just by Googling that the country was extremely homophobic, it gave me one story. But when I was there for myself, I saw a completely different story. This is not even in the UK, I must tell you, that I was this open with anybody. Not even in the US either. Like, I was kissing and touching and having walks down the beach in Brazil, and people just see me and not see me and the person and not say anything. And it's remarkable that if I Googled LGBT issues in the UK, I'm not seeing homophobia coming up as a highlight, right? Mm-hmm. If I do that in the US, I would see homophobia come up, but I think it would be more overshadowed by the positive news stories. So I think it's really just the stories that are being told, specifically for Jamaica, that we have to be reminded that there are many of them. And what we are now acknowledging and what we're now seeing is that there's less bad stories than before, than 10 years ago or than 15 years ago.
Yeah. And like I was saying, I think social media and just the fact that a lot more people are on social media kind of exposes them to people that are in their lives that are off that life, not lifestyle, but are gay. Because I don't like the whole lifestyle thing. But
I was gonna say, that's a part of our language. That is a part of the language that, like, we know not to use pronouns, and these are things that we were trained as gay people from before.
You don't say he or him.
You don't say he or him, and you don't say gay. I remember even saying gay is kind of like a taboo because you say, oh, it must so, or
yeah, you find a little code word, exactly,
or a sport. Like, we came up with these these random terms to speak about what we're talking about, and like you just said, lifestyle. Like, it comes naturally for you to describe it as something other or something that you can't speak of. And it's a part of the society that we're living in. It's much easier to say gay in, maybe, let's say a white gay person, is easier for them to say gay who's raised in like this community that is gay. Like, it's rainbows are painted everywhere, but in a specific context, you find yourself using specific language or a certain type of language that erases who you really are. But it's really just a part of the whole experience.
That's very true. It's very true. I just don't like using the word because I feel like you said, it erases the reality. I see that. It erases the reality of like who I am, and it almost undermines it in a sense. But you're right. It is the language that we've almost created to navigate that life. Again, to navigate the experience I was really trying to get at of just growing up in Jamaica and living there. But we wanted to thank you, Dervin, for taking the time out with our technical difficulties.
I loved everything you had to say.
Yeah, it was really
thank you.
And I think our listeners will really connect and enjoy, hearing a different perspective and you setting the record straight on several things. And I'm sure Erica looks forward to meeting you.
Yeah, next time you come here to America.
Hopefully in December.
Oh my God, yes.
Well, it's on the recording now, so you gotta come.
I can change my mind whenever I can.
No, you can't.
No. But yeah, December is the thing. I mean, I'm glad that I was able to join this call. I've been wanting to be a part of somebody's podcast for the longest while. I hope for this conversation that you change my have something to say to the beginning.
But thank you for joining, and for our listeners, please remember to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And remember to rate and review.